Hey, good evening, everybody. Bagels with Terry Kelzer. My name is Mike Scott, and I'm the program director at Farm Table Foundation, as most of you probably know. It's good to see some familiar names there. I don't know about you all, but I love taking classes with Terry, and I'm sure that's partly why you're here. And I also love bagels, so I'm pretty curious about this opportunity. Terry's daughter Angela's going to help out, and she said to me before the class, she's like, "Man, I've never had bagels right out of the oven, and they are pretty good." So maybe we'll all get to experience this soon, and perhaps some of you might even be cooking along. But as most of you know, our mission is to connect folks to local food, local farmers, and the land. So there's a community building aspect, there's a conservation aspect to what we do, and of course, a local foods aspect in terms of reconnecting us to the skills involved with cooking and growing and preserving healthy local food. And in the meantime, Terry, please jump in, and we're glad to have you here.
Hi, and welcome everybody. Our topic tonight is, of course, bagels, which is a wonderful, unique bread. And I always say there's always a story behind the food that makes it much more than just something to eat. And there's a quote from Ed Levine, who wrote about bagels for the New York Times in about the 1950s. A bagel is a round bread made of simple ingredients, high gluten flour, salt, water, yeast, and malt. Its dough is boiled, then baked. The result should be a rich caramel color. A bagel should weigh 4 ounces or less, should make a slight cracking sound when you bite into it. A bagel should be eaten warm, and ideally should be no more than 4 or 5 hours old when consumed. All else is not a bagel. So he's got a pretty tight description there on what he thinks a bagel is. The first mention of bagels actually goes back to Krakow, Poland in 1610, but they likely came from German immigrants bringing in pretzels, the only other boiled bread that we know of. And the bagels first came to the United States in the 1920s, so it's kind of a new food here from the Eastern European and Russian immigrants. And bagels were first sold in grocery stores in the 1950s, and Lender's introduced the first frozen bagel in 1960. The other famous bagel is the Montreal Bagel, which is a sweeter bagel than the classic New York style bagel. That bagel does not have any salt. It's sweetened with honey, and when you boil it, you also put honey in the water. So, and another point, the little hole in the center of the bagel isn't just only for looks. In the old days, street vendors would have a long wooden dowel, and they would fill it up with bagels and walk around town and sell their bagels for eating money for themselves. All right, we're going to go to your recipe, and we're going to start with the first basic bagel, and we're going to kind of talk about ingredients as I go along. And just what I'm doing. Your first step is your sponge. Very important. And the flour I'm using tonight is high gluten flour, which I got from King Arthur. It's an expensive flour. I just wanted, for authenticity, I wanted to have the real flour to use. Mostly when I make bagels, I will use bread flour. Perfectly acceptable. You can also buy just like packages of wheat gluten, and you can add a tablespoon of that to your bread flour to make a stronger dough than what your bread flour will normally do. And so that's the basic thing, is it needs to be strong. And this is your densest bread in the world. And so it's a tough dough to stand up to boiling water. So we start with our sponge, which we're going to take. I got it. We're going to start with our flour and 3 cups of flour.
So Terry, if you did use a bread flour, not the high gluten stuff, would your bagels just maybe not be as tough and might break down in the bowl?
No, it'll work. I don't really see the difference so far using this week and using other, but there's people who make bagels every day and have for years and years, and perhaps to get it just the right consistency. And I wouldn't say my bagels are perfect, but they taste good to me. So, and I also listened to a fella who, when the pandemic started, you couldn't get bread flour even. So he made his bagels with all-purpose flour and said, really, they were fine. So, maybe not, they didn't probably have quite as dense a texture that he wanted, but they were fine, he said. So, it's the process and the flour. So just use what you can get. And, for first starting out, I would think just start with bread flour. And if you really love making them and want to develop your skills more, then get yourself some high gluten flour. So for our sponge here, then we're just going to start with the dry ingredients and add a teaspoon of instant yeast. Now, if you weren't using instant yeast, you might want to soften it first. If you have regular store-bought dry active yeast, that sometimes isn't very fresh, isn't very good, so you want to be sure your yeast is good and bubbly. With instant yeast, you almost never have that problem. So here we've just mixed the flour and yeast, and now I'm going to add 2 cups of room temperature water, 2.5 cups. And you can see it's a fairly stiff dough right away. And this is our sponge.
Terry, why is it called a sponge?
It's like a sparter or a poolish or just another word for a pre-ferment.
Okay.
A kind of a loose dough. It's not where you're finally going to be with the texture of your dough, but it gets the yeast going and it gets the flour softening in the moisture. And then what we're going to do is, let's see the plastic wrap. Yeah. Then we're just going to cover this with plastic wrap, and this is our first stage. And now this rests for 2 to 3 hours. So I'll give you that. And we have this has rested for 2 to 3 hours. We're not going to wait for it to rest, of course. And now we just shoot down to our second batch of ingredients. Since we're making egg bagels, we're going to add just the yolks, egg yolks, 2 egg yolks. We're going to add malt. I'm using malt syrup. There is also powdered malt that you can get from King Arthur Or I think sometimes organic food stores have that. And we're going to put in like a good tablespoon of barley malt. That's nice, gooey, sticky stuff. Now I'm gonna stir this in before I add our salt. And you can see how stretchy this dough has gotten already. I'm going to kind of coat everything with the sugary ingredients first. And then I'm going to add our tablespoon of salt. And this is going in our mixing bowl.
Hi, I'm a little confused because the recipe says add additional yeast
That's right, it does.
with the egg yolks.
I forgot that. Now we want 2 more teaspoons, right? You keep me up to date.
Sorry, 1 teaspoon baking. Oh, no. I'm wrong.
I got it. Yeah.
Half a teaspoon.
Half teaspoon.
Okay, we got it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna turn.
You got people keeping on your toes here, Terry.
It's very important, when you do this, and yeah, do the best you can. You remember what you remember. So,
And Terry, does the malt primarily sweeten things? Is that what you said?
it is a sweetener. It is also a flavor ingredient. The unique flavor of New York bagels is said to come from the barley malt. So, and then we have 3 to 4 more cups, and I'm just going to use, since this stuff is so darn expensive, I'm going to use half bread flour and half gluten flour. I think this little, is it 3 pounds? It's like $11. So here I have some nice organic bread flour. And we're going to try to work this in as best we can. And we want to be sure to get our 3 cups in, and maybe 4, 3.5 to 4 if we can. As I said, this is a dense bread dough. It's not like any other bread that you make where you're mostly going for lightness.
And do you ever use a food processor, or a mixer and the bread hook to do this instead of stirring? And
Yes, and I shall do that shortly. I always do. After 50 some years of baking and rolling and kneading, the old girl's wrists are starting to go. I kind of can pretty much still ignore it, but every once in a while I get those sharp pains, and I'll get the basics here. And as you notice, this is a KitchenAid bowl, and we're gonna put it on the KitchenAid here. I'm going to leave this in the background. And on a mixer like that, it should go at least 6 minutes. So, we're not going to wait for it. I have other doughs ready here. But by hand, 10 to 12 minutes of hard kneading. A lot of times, I'll start it and get as much in flour into the dough as I can, and then you always finish it by hand anyway. I don't think I need that anymore. Okay. Now, here we have our well-kneaded, rested, and raised bread dough, bagel dough. And I won't need that anymore. And we're going to take this out.
Your recipe says you can use the window pane test. What is that?
Yes, I will show you that. And I can show you when that one gets closer too. But you take a piece of dough. This is when you tell that it's kneaded enough. And you start to pull it out. And you should be able to stretch it so it almost is like you could see through it. And it doesn't tear. And as you can see, it's probably really hard to see, but it's quite thin and it has no ripping tendencies. But for example, and that makes a little more flour. But some that's early on, it will tear like that. If it's not kneaded enough, it will tear. You can't window pane it at all. Actually, that doesn't have to finish. Okay. Now, generally, your recipe that I don't know if it says this recipe makes a dozen 4-ounce bagels. So the first thing you do usually is divide your dough in half. And then each half 3 pieces. And you generally want 4-ounce piece. Now I did this morning. Every single one I threw on was 4 ounces exactly. That's perfect. That one's too much. And you don't have to be so fussy. Okay. $40. Perfect. 51. Okay. All right, now, you see we got kind of a raggy piece of dough here. We're going to put it on our table, and we're going to pinch it forward like we're making little Chinese dumplings. And we're going to do like so. And pull it all up together like a little dumpling there. Then you turn over your dumpling side, and then you roll it. You roll it smooth. I'm going to set it there. Again, you're making a dumpling. Cute little package. Bring it all together. And then roll it. And then, of course, some most professional bakers like to do 2 at once. No. You can tell they do this all day, you know. So, yeah. So you roll them. nice and smooth. Okay, make our dumpling. And there was actually a law in New York City until, well, close to the 1960s that all bagels had to be made by hand. It was a law from the Bakers Union. Okay. And another thing historically that I found fairly interesting was that people made bagels a lot after religious fasting days in Eastern Europe and Russia because they were quick to make. And you can go from cold bagel dough to the water to the oven. You can have these bagels shaped and put in your refrigerator, cover them up good so they don't dry out. And you can take them right out of the refrigerator after your fast day is over, pop them in the water, pop them in the oven. You have something really filling when you're really hungry. That's the one thing I like about a bagel. It's, the one thing that I can have for breakfast, and it really fills me up. It lasts me a long time till I'm hungry again. So here we go. Now we just move along to the fun part, and this is the part everybody's going to want to do. And this here, we have now it's putting the hole in our bagel. And so we're gonna take our thumbs and we're gonna press through to the other side, and then you're gonna start working it out, and you make a nice big circle like that. And don't worry that your circle's too big because it always starts to come back together. So just make a nice big circle, and we're gonna probably re-roll those again before they're finished. And so we're going to, we'll poke right on through, and then you kind of then slip your fingers in and make nice round circles. Always try to keep the pretty side up. And then I think this would be a great thing for kids to do. I think they'd have a great time. Of course, their fingers might be a little too small. I don't know. I never tried it with the kids. There we go. Now, if you see you're kind of a little bit lopsided, don't worry. Just try to do your best to smooth it around. And this one I'm a little upsided there.
Terry, earlier you said that bagels are the densest
Yes.
bread, right?
Yes, they are the densest bread of the bread world.
Is that what makes them that way? Is it because of the high gluten flour?
High gluten flour, and then this is really a lot of flour we stuffed into this 2 cups of water.
Oh.
Nearly 8 cups of flour, where I think for most breads 6 would be top.
So it's a lot of flour, plus it tends to be high gluten flour. Those are the two things that make it so dense.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not for our gluten-free friends, I'm afraid. I did see a gluten-free recipe, but I don't know what they'd be like. Now, the thing is with these two, now you can take them at this stage, put them on a sheet pan, put them in the fridge, and that would be a 48-hour fermentation for these, which only supposed to make them better. It's not like the softer breads where they'd be puffing too much and breaking down. They will pretty much stay this size. And of course, any bread reminds me of my days on the bread line of the commercial bakery. And people yelling at you, faster, faster.
When was that, Terry? Was that in the cities?
Yeah, that was one of my college days. I worked at a big commercial bakery night shift. It was called egg-enriched at the time, all those years ago. And they would have a foreman whose job was to stand at the end of the line and yell at you for 8 hours. Yeah, it was because I thought I'm not staying here forever. Some of those dear ladies had been there for 40 years.
Wow.
But I knew it was just, for some college money, and the pay was good. And so I could kind of laugh about it to myself, and say, this is kind of silly. That somebody has, we had a tornado came through and all the power went out and there were no lights even. And we couldn't stop. We had to keep going, and we had people holding lights over us. And because the bread had to keep moving because it was rising and it had to be dealt with. So, yeah, the good old days. And then there was bread stuck in ovens that were burning and they couldn't get it out. So you can take that off. Okay, now we have a big pot of boiling water. And we're going to add to that our baking soda, a good tablespoon of baking soda. Traditionally, also, they use lye. There is a baker's lye. It's something that really isn't necessary. You can buy it online. But lye is lye. It's a little dangerous to use. So, and then as I take these, I probably don't want to do more than 3 at a time. Do I have my tray in front of me? Oh, yes. Here. You want to have a pan ready. Here I just have a sheet pan with a piece of parchment paper. And you want a nice scoop, something to help you dip this out. Could you pull me some paper towels, just about 4 pieces or something like that? I don't need a lot. And then we're going to, I think the most that you want to put in your boiling water pan is like 3. And we're going to let those go for about a minute on the first side, maybe 30 seconds on the other side. It gelatinizes the outside. It starts the bagel cooking on the outside first. It kind of keeps the inside moist. It gives you, it's the baking soda, baker's lye, that gives you the chewiness that you come to expect in a bagel. So now we're gonna, doesn't work for turning over. I gotta have what is this? Now we just have about 30 seconds on that side. Now you can see my holes are getting smaller. And sometimes I'm just left with a little dimple on the inside, which is not my favorite. So I found a way today to take care of that. I'll show you my secret. So I drain them off with just a little bit there. And let's see. I guess I can show them as get more in. And you know, don't be afraid to stretch them out.
Terry, is the water still actively boiling a little bit, or is it cooled off?
Just a very low. Okay. Not so you notice it, no.
Okay.
But it is hot enough.
And Cynthia asked a question, do you add more barley malt syrup to the water as well?
You can. You do not have to, but you can. And often bakers do. It helps with the color on the outside. Okay, here I have my 6 boiled bagels. And maybe we'll just put those on a plate. And I'm going to shut that noise off. And now we're going to take our egg, just a regular dinner time. That's fine. And a nice egg wash. And this helps with the browning, of course. Now, the fun part also is your toppings. I believe I gave you the recipe for the everything topping for the everything bagel. And this is a fourth a cup of sesame seeds, a fourth of a cup of poppy seeds, 3 tablespoons dried onion flakes, 3 tablespoons of garlic flakes, and you know, I think 2 tablespoons of salt is a little heavy. I would just put 1. 1 is plenty. And so we're just going to coat. I'm going to do 3 with the everything. And then I'm going to do 1 with just poppy seeds. Or 2, I guess. Since I made a lot of sesame seed ones yesterday. And then I'm going to do that. Sesame seeds. So that's all, like that. And now they're ready to go right in the oven. My dog is interested for sure. Now I have a 450 degree oven. I'm going to set that for 20. I think 20 is a little long. I'm going to set it for 15. Okay, now they're baking, and I added an extra little thing to our class tonight. Do you all know what bialys are? This is where you take a bagel dough and you do not boil.
You don't what, Terry?
You don't boil them.
Oh.
They're just baked. A lot of times on the East Coast, you will find bagel shops and bialy shops. They will be together, and they're for folks who love onions. This is the clear deal for you. I made a batch of Barley dough, and I followed everything the same, all the steps of the bagel dough, except I used all-purpose flour. And so it's a little bit softer bread. And Bialys, we use a little flour. We use a little flour throughout. Well, we're just going to cut this dough. Now these you cut into about 4 ounces as well. What I did this morning was I took 3 big whole onions and put them in a saucepan, and I cooked them for about an hour. And I cooked them down, onions with some poppy seeds and a little bit of salt. And you come up with this very cooked, very cool onion mixture. And this is going to be in your Barley dough. Now we take and do kind of our dumpling thing again. Only this time, we start to press it out like so. And you make a thin, and these you sprinkle with flour. When you buy them, you should get, it always has like a little dust of flour on them. And so let's see, so this has an indent. And you want to keep that nice indent. So then, so you you work it so the center is very thin, like so. And we'll just do 3 of these. Now you can put, I put poppy seeds in the dough just so I could tell the difference between my doughs, so I knew which was the Barley dough and which is not. And then you take a nice scoop of this onion mixture and you push it into the center. And you take your
Terry, maybe you said this, sorry if I missed it, but it looks really smooth. Do you puree that onion mixture?
Yeah. I cooked it for an hour, probably it was a half an hour first, covered, and then I just mixed it up, covered it again, cooked it for another half hour, and then took off the cover and cooked it slow for another half hour.
Okay.
And so I think it's almost like making the onion jam at the farm table that Sue makes. I think you could actually use that for this.
So do people make bialys with other things in the center?
Generally, it's known as an onion bun.
Okay.
But of course, you can do whatever I'm sure you could. And it wouldn't, maybe even a poppy seed filling or something like that would be cool. But and then I push it down. Oh, and I forgot the one thing I was going to show you about my bagels, because I bet they're staying a little bit apart. I forgot to put in my hole holder. I used just a whole bunch of these decorator tubes to put inside the center so my bagels would stay. Up here. Do that. So here's what I will show you my finished products for today. And those can rest like 10 minutes. And here is our finished, this is our finished bialys. And the way that you might serve this is you would cut it like a bagel. Then you take your onion jam there and you spread that. You can spread that on one side. And then we're going to take some cream cheese and put it on the other side. We're going to close that up. And that's a wonderful, wonderful, tasty little roll. Now here's our everything bagel. I think we're still under the 5-hour limit because these are baked by noon. And of course with some generous there's a bagel shop in New York that puts like half a stick of cream cheese on every bagel, and so the center is about that thick. Sounds pretty tasty. So that's our bagels and bialys. Are there any questions? Be good. What time do we have?
About 6:45.
Okay.
Any questions, folks? Or?
And we have our bagels almost ready. If you insert a thermometer, if it goes to 190, then you know they're done. An instant read thermometer. Cool. And sometimes if they're not brown enough for the last minute, I'll shut off the oven and turn on the broil part of the oven and then set it for 2 minutes and just let it give it that extra brown on the top, which sometimes looks really nice. And these are our sesame and poppy seed and everything bagel. Is anybody going to try it?
My kids love like a cinnamon sugar type bagel. Could you do that as well? A sweet version with that egg wash and then like a cinnamon sugar mixture?
Right. And I didn't send you that, but I will send you the actual recipe. I can do that. It's a tablespoon of cinnamon that you put into the dough, and you put in 2 cups of rinsed and dried off raisins. You want to rinse them off to get off the wild yeast, and also it plumps them a little bit. And also the other bagel that is one of the most popular is the French toast bagel, which you might have heard of. And that one uses maple syrup instead of barley malt. When you're putting in your malt, You put in maple syrup, you put in a little bit of vanilla, and you put in an extra egg yolk. Instead of 2, you add 3 egg yolks. And I guess that is one of the best-selling bagels at Panera. And my son stopped in today and wanted to know why I didn't make those. He likes the sweeter bagels. And I told him that that's called a donut.
Right.
And actually, it's quite interesting that bagels outsell donuts. That there were 5 billion bagels supposedly sold in the U.S. last year, and only 3 billion donuts. I don't know who's counting, but that's sort of interesting. I think people think of the bagel as a little more healthful because it's a little less sweet and gooey. It's called a donut with the sin removed.
Terry, we've got a nice comment from Carolyn here. It says, you always make me feel confident that I can bake things I never expected to be able to do. And she
Yes.
said, my Danish Kringle was a huge hit over the holidays.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. And you know, that's a lot of these things are scary to people. And I always figure, you know, if they can make it, I can make it. And I just jump right in no matter what happens. Probably one of the weirdest things I've ever jumped right in and tried to make was fortune cookies. And that was interesting. And I think they turned out good, but very interesting. Yeah, you know, somebody started making these things years ago without all the extra special things that we have, even ovens, you know, so that, you know, you can do it. It's confidence. Julia Child said, you just got to be confident in what you're doing. If you make a mistake, just laugh it off and keep going. Which I think I just adored her when I think it must have been in the 1960s at some point, when I remember being on a trip with a bunch of girls and we stopped at a motel in Omaha, Nebraska, and where the motel was situated, there were trains going by all night long. And Julia Child was on the TV, and they were running her series, and people were, and I was just sitting at the edge of my bed laughing and roaring. I thought, this is wonderful. I enjoyed every minute. Of course, my friends, they wanted to sleep, but we couldn't sleep anyway on the trains. So anyway, silly stories.
Good stories.
Confidence, that's the thing. It may seem really hard, but basically it's flour and butter and oil and just how you put it together.
Well, it certainly looks delicious.
Yeah, I wish I could share through the screen. This everything is making me real hungry. Also, I love onions, so I just love the bialys. And one other thing too, when I'm making an onion bagel, like you can just do onions on the top, but I do like to put onions inside as well while I'm doing the mixing step. And for there, use dehydrated onion because you have a stronger flavor that comes through.
Oh yeah, that reminds me, Terry. I was wondering if you sometimes do, like sometimes bagels will have cheese or other elements within the dough, it seems like.
Right.
So when you do that, you mix it in at what point?
It would be at the second part of the dough, not at the sponge part. But at the second part, any things that extra you want to put in, your cinnamon raisins, your maple syrup, and extra eggs, vanilla. If you wanted to put in Asiago cheese and then top the top, I know that's a pot that when I see that one, I tend to buy it. So.
Okay. Angela, thank you for your help. And I hope you enjoy all those bagels. This is
Thanks
Angela.
for everyone for coming.
Yeah. I guess it's bagels for dinner tonight, you guys?
I believe so, Mike. Bagels are on deck.
Bagels and a glass of wine.
Right. Can't forget the wine.
Well, nice to see you all, and thank you for joining us, everybody.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
You.
Thank you very much. This was
Bye-bye.
fun. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.